Hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is Carrie JK and I'm here today with another 5 minutes with Joe. And we're going to be talking about a recent executive order that Barack Obama has put out around insider threats and just trying to understand what does that mean, how are we involved in that, and what to be looking for in this emerging and very interesting space.
Well, it's interesting that President Obama has issued the executive order. You know, you get all kinds of commentary about stuff like this. Is it too late? Is it, the right time, etc.? I think when you see this kind of progress being made, in any event, anyone who has a vested interest in this, I think, sees it as a good thing. But let's pick apart what actually was said in the order. Several things were said. First of all, this is all about reducing the risks posed by things like WikiLeaks. So situations where large amounts of federal government information, typically classified information, might be obtained by an insider, i.e. someone working as an employee of the federal government or as a contractor of the federal government, someone who has inside access, and then making it available to the outside, particularly for exposure in situations that are not great for the operation of the ongoing duties of the country, the agencies, etc. So what the executive order states is that first of all, it continues to place the onus on the agencies to be responsible for protecting against insider threats within the confines of privacy and Freedom of Information Act type policies that continue to be in force. It also states that they need to declare a senior official that will be responsible for making sure that the agency is compliant with these requirements while reducing the risks. It identifies the need for that official to establish an insider threat program within the agency to actually show progress against these sorts of threats and risks. And it also puts the onus on the agency to do self-assessments to be able to make sure that they're complying with the overall need to reduce these risks. At the same time, though, it declares several other puts things in motion that actually provides the other side in terms of the oversight and the actual progress to be made with these sorts of technologies. An insider threat task force, which appears like it'll be identifying necessary technologies to achieve progress in this area. An overall steering committee for information sharing and safeguarding. It's important that they're calling out both information sharing, which they want to continue to perform the missions in a digital age, but while safeguarding that information within the context of these sorts of threats. So I think an important statement there. And then lastly, it does name DoD and NSA, Department of Defense and National Security Agency, as the key executive agents for this safeguarding aspect of the policy and of the executive order. Establishing policies, establishing standards, and establishing compliance assessments. And what that says is that DoD and NSA clearly will have some emerging responsibility to go in and double up on the self-assessments performed by the agencies to make sure that the overall effect is being handled in a way that's more solvent, more useful.
And it sounds like it's not just, a lot of talk. They're trying to operationalize this with multiple layers of responsibility. So that's great news. What do you think the standards piece will mean from a technologies perspective? I know we've already been involved in conversations around some of the standards for one of the agencies. So how do you think that's going to be operationalized or articulated?
I think the way this has been expressed is one, it's shrewd because it puts the onus on the agencies, but it establishes some responsibility for some central authority and capability here. And clearly, if you read between the lines, they're creating an opportunity for these two sides of the equation to catch up with themselves, right? So agencies, be forewarned. You need to take direct responsibility for this, but by the way, we're going to be checking up and we're going to work together to make this better, right? I think, so what you'll see is, I think you'll see standards or expectations starting to be shared from the central bodies in ways that would guide the agencies toward progress, particularly if they don't have their own efforts underway. To the extent that they do have their efforts underway, they will have to fit into some of these emerging standards and practices, etc. We know from our work with many of these agencies, which of course, some of which is quite sensitive, we know that there's progress being made. That this is, I think, consistent with a big effort being made in this area to really reduce these risks. And a lot of it has to do with doing a better job of monitoring and auditing access to information. And for the DoD and the NSA, and for that matter the federal government, this is a big job. There's lots of access to lots of information, and so as we always talk about, is a very scalable problem. And when you try to scale a solution to address this kind of scope of a problem, technology challenges are abundant, and that's an area where we've been I think very, very much validated in what we do with our architecture and the way that we serve these sorts of use cases. But we expect more to follow here with this kind of coalescence of some requirements and probably several iterations of compliance reporting, self-assessment, and emerging standards for how a broader cross-federal activity will be undertaken.
And so, I know we don't have to move off the topic entirely, but was insider threat a big topic at the recent SignNet event?
Absolutely. If you look at what was being discussed, the Secure Innovation Network, it brings together both agencies as well as academia and startup companies as well as large vendors and the venture community. All those people are getting together to talk about these sorts of issues. Insider threat was clearly a key theme in terms of a vector that is driving us to be more careful about some of these exposures. But I think on the flip side, you also saw a great requirement and theme around situational awareness. So not just situational awareness in terms of monitoring the behavior and activities of insiders to the tune of trying to reduce the threat of insider threat, but also situational awareness in performing the mission. How is the infrastructure operating? What incursions are we seeing from insiders or externals or bad actors, what have you, boiling up to an overall level of monitoring and insight and capability to really harness the tools of the digital age to be more effective with missions and mission control.
Interesting. So this will be one to watch, definitely, and for our customers, we are right in the thick of those conversations and helping lead the charge around best practices. And do you want to talk a little bit at all about the various vendors that are, well, not necessarily the vendors, but the technology, sort of the coming together of not just endpoint protection, not just DLP, but how this all kind of nests together?
Well, I think it's fair to say that to be effective with insider threat, you need to be able to watch where people are going. So there's end user activities that you need to be able to log and monitor. You need to do that both in real time and across longer time horizons, because the way these people accumulate information, you have to be able to watch how that's accumulating over
across
time,
the landscape, yeah.
and then what events sort of indicate that they're starting to do things with information that doesn't fit their particular role. There are other things that you could use, other tools that you could use. DLP is an example of one where on a more precise, more policy-driven basis, you could start to filter some of the activities and behaviors that could happen, even if you're just monitoring. So I think some of those relevant technologies begin to play a bigger role. Obviously, if you have a compromised end station, that is very, very relevant to this, because regardless of what users are doing, either for good or sloppily or for evil, right? If you have a compromised endpoint, we know that bots and things can start to take advantage of information that might be accumulating there. So all these pieces of the puzzle have to be brought together to be truly effective, and our role continues to be one of helping to drive forward very, very scalable and vast monitoring and analysis of broad scope events that start to indicate when these situations are worth noting and isolating for further investigation.
So we'll leave you with one more little piece, which is that we've put together a pretty nice RFP that allows you to look at what some of the things are that you need to think about as you're thinking about insider threats, whether you're in the federal government space or not. So please reach out and let us know if you'd be interested in getting a copy of that. Anything else?
I think that'll do it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back with another 5 Minutes with Joe.